With that, welcome to Inside this edition of Big Ten Today, presented by Gatorade. Rick Pizzo, flanked by Dave Revson and Jake Butt. You know, Dave, we sat here last week and we looked ahead to the first rankings release from the College Football Playoff Committee. We got that on Tuesday. Debate, discussion, some disagreement ensued. But now we get to see this weekend, with the first week of play after those rankings, how those teams inside the top 10, and more importantly for the Big Ten, the 7 inside the top 25 fare this coming weekend.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm sure you would agree, Jake. All of these 7 teams legitimately have a shot to play in the postseason. It's what makes the expanded playoff so exciting and what makes this month of November so exciting.
That's what we were talking about on Tuesday night. The committee did such a great job with the rankings, and each weekend now just has an added importance for each one of these teams, as all 7 that are ranked feel like they got a path, but obviously you got to win. Easier said than done with
all
some
7
of the great
will not
quality
get there
plays. Exactly.
That would be impressive.
I think we could say that really would be something, yes. I think we could say that with great assurance. Those college football playoff rankings are our big story. As we said, Big Ten was 7 in the CFP. It came out on Tuesday. Ohio State, Indiana 1 and 2. They would both be in the current playoff bracket, as would Oregon. The other 4 likely need to win out to get a spot. They are USC, Iowa, Michigan, and Washington. The 7 teams, by the way, the most the Big Ten has ever had in the CFP rankings. And 2 of those teams in the rankings squaring off this weekend, as we see on the big board. The Hawks will host the Ducks. The action starts tomorrow night with USC hosting Northwestern. Indiana goes to Penn State. We have 2 ranked teams here on the Big Ten Network. Washington visits Wisconsin, and the top-ranked Buckeyes visiting Purdue. And Jake, you'll be calling that game. Let's dive into that one a little bit. It's pretty amazing, guys, to see where Ohio State is when you think about finishing off last year as number 1, all of the star power that they lost off last year's team. What does it tell you about the job that Ryan Day has done?
Well, it tells me he's one of, if not the best coaches in college football right now. And I think, Ohio State has been winning at such a high level for so long. We're almost numb to it. It's just like an expectation. And I want to zoom out and just recognize the job that Ryan Day has done. And I was thinking about it. I think to fully tell the story, you have to go back to last season where, remember the offseason storylines of how talented that Ohio State roster was. It was the best roster anyone had seen in Ohio State history. And then they lose to Oregon, and then they lose to Michigan. And I think the infamous player-led meeting where he stood up in front of his team with an open chest and said, hey, I want to hear what you guys have to say. And he took some bullets from those players. But to me, that's a leader. And he communicated to the players in the locker room, I hear you, I value you, and we're going to go get this done together. And then they go in that 3-game stretch and win the national title. And I say that because what I see is a team full of talented players, but there's a selflessness there. There's a culture that's built, and I think it goes back to that team meeting last year. I don't know. I was trying to think how many coaches I've been around that would be willing to stand in front of their players and say, let's hear what you have to say about the job I've done. And I just think that is the perfect example of leadership. And what I see is an Ohio State team that is fully bought into the messaging that Ryan Day has put out this year. That's why they've been so dominant. And then how about going out to bring in Matt Patricia and the job he's done? I mean, one, I think there's the benefit of Patricia coming from the NFL and going on a number of his own postseason runs. The experience that he can talk to Coach Day and roster management so they're fresh and healthy going into the postseason. But 2, that was a big storyline for the Buckeye defense, all the guys that they lost to the NFL, and yet I think they're better this year. And talking to Patricia this week, it's not about, when he teaches the defense, it's not about everyone knowing their individual job. He wants the players to learn concepts. Why that matters is that's how they move Arvell Reese around and Caleb Downs around and create one-on-one matchups for this brand new defensive line that's been dominant. So yes, the players, but it's the coaching job of the Ohio State staff that really stands out to me.
And it was a risk bringing in Matt Patricia. Here's a guy who really spent almost all of his coaching career in the NFL, didn't really have a lot of college ties. You'd won a national championship with Jim Knowles. You also lose Chip Kelly back to the NFL. And I know that Ryan Day had given up the play calling to Chip, but with Brian Hartline, you have a first-time play caller taking over a team that's a defending national champion, and so much is expected of it. I do quickly want to point out the fact that you brought this up to me earlier this week, and it has been fully mapped out by Ryan Day. He knew what a slog it was last year to win the national championship and go through all those games. So the way the play calling has been set up this year, if you look at all the metrics, Ohio State, based on the number of plays they've run versus everybody else in the country, they will likely have played a full game to game and a half fewer number of snaps heading into the playoff than the rest of the CFP contenders.
They're building in like an additional 1 or 2 bye weeks.
It's unbelievable.
That matters because health, we know, matters to make a great postseason run. And I go back to the trust because what that means is there's less opportunities to get big level of stats for your players, but the players fully trust and are bought into Ryan Day, understanding the ultimate goal is to win a national title again.
I love the way he framed it in his news conference this week, talking about the season being at the halfway point. Right? Because
Coach,
that's crazy to think about.
But again, like based on
Yes.
where they were last year, right? You have the luxury of saying, hey, if everything goes well, we're going to play 15, 16 games. So it is pretty remarkable to see the juggernaut that they have built. And it's got to be a little bit intimidating if you're Purdue as you look at this. What can you do if you're Barry Odom, a team that has been handed a really difficult schedule, that probably lost out on its best chances to get a win? How do you finish up and carry some sort of positive feeling into next year?
Well, they should be proud of the way they're playing football because that's something that's fully in their control. I see a team that is trending completely in the right direction by Barry Odom. I think he's done a great job. Even Coach Day, unprompted, gave Barry Odom credit and his staff credit in our coaching meetings this week. They took it to Michigan. They've taken it to a lot of teams this year and come up short in some frustrating losses, and yet they just come back the next week ready, and they're trending in the right direction. It can't be about results right now, but to me, I'm fully bought into the job that Barry Odom and his staff have been doing.
it is a big ask. You face not one, but 2 Heisman contenders from that Ohio State offense. And speaking of one of those Heisman contenders, it's Julian Sayin, who has been phenomenal this year, along with, of course, Jeremiah Smith. Taking on Purdue, it's right here on the Big Ten Network. And Dave mentioned a second-ranked team here on the network on Saturday as Washington battles Wisconsin. Our coverage begins with countdown to kickoff, 12:30 Eastern, 9:30 Pacific on the Big Ten Network and the Fox Sports app. Today's Gatorade Big Stat turns our focus to the number 2 team in this week's CFP rankings. Yet another redonkulous number for Indiana, tied for the 3rd most wins of at least 40 points in any single season over the past decade. Hoosiers just one such blowout win away from tying the 2019 vintages at Clemson and Ohio State. And oh, by the way, IU has 3 regular season games remaining against opponents who have combined to win exactly 0 Big Ten games. Some of that based on injury, some of that based on schedule. You look at Indiana on the road against Penn State, and this is a Penn State team that, to be fair, despite having 0 conference wins, still has a ton of NFL talent on that roster, and you hope enough pride to finish big in November. And yet folks keep wanting to say, well, this could be the week. This could be the game where Indiana stubs its toe and goes on upset alert, and every single week Sig says, you know what, I like that idea, but instead, why don't we just win by 45 or 50?
Yeah, I mean, his messaging has been the most impressive thing to me. I mean, that's the definition of a head coach, is getting his team ready to play. But, you know, success, it can be dangerous in the sense that I think the first thing you said is one of the big narratives that I've been hearing on a national level of, look at Indiana's schedule. I mean, they're going to sleepwalk to the Big Ten championship, and then, man, we're already talking about Indiana making a run to the national title, and yet let's just zoom out a little bit. Your key players, Surratt injured, Aiden Fisher injured, Drew Evans injured. They're beat up on this team right now. That's going to be a challenge for Cignetti to manage the health of his roster while also ensuring they're ready to play against a Penn State team. I just looked it up. They're 10th in talent composite in all of college football. So just a number to speak to how talented they are. I'm sure they want to get a win for Terry Smith, beloved in that locker room. So Penn State's going to continue to be ready to play. Indiana will have to match
talent composite? I've never heard of talent
4
composite.
4 stars, 5 stars, like it goes back to your recruiting rankings and measures it up.
Guy's been in college for 2-3 years.
They're a talented team. I just wanted to put a number.
Well, I
to be
would
like,
say
hey,
you could look at the NFL draft projections and say there's a lot of talent out there,
now
too.
that to me is closer than what your high school recruiting rankings were 2 or 3 years into your college careers.
Yeah, I hear you. I think there's no dispute they have a lot of really good players on that
However
team.
you want to spin it.
Right. I do think it's interesting, you bring up the question of injuries for Indiana. And I do think that the one thing that I think about is, like, they've put together an incredible roster. Like, all you have to do is look at the running back spot. Yeah. Like, Lee Beebe goes out with an injury early this year and thought, wow, that might damage them. And they have just rolled through running backs, right? They've gone over 300 rushing yards 5 different times. They don't really have a true feature back, I wouldn't say. Maybe Roman Hemby is the closest thing. So it does speak to depth, but I do wonder a little bit, just a little bit about like if that's the one lingering question mark is do they have the same amount of quality depth that, let's say, Ohio State does because
especially
of
on the lines, I would say, especially on the offensive and defensive lines.
Yeah, I think they'll prove that they do. Like, I think this might be the best team in America. In fact, I kind of believe they are. But if there is one question mark, right, they had some pretty good fortune, I'd say, last year. Curtis Work got banged up. They had some injuries on the offensive line at the end, which I think came back to bite them. They had pretty good injury fortune, though, a season ago.
That is a requirement to make these runs, too. I
Yes.
mean, that is what every head coach is managing at this point in the season. How hard can I go in practice versus trying to keep my team healthy? And you may like your backup players, but the drop-off from Elijah Surratt to whoever is going to fill that role, it's going to be a big drop-off. I mean, he's that good of a player. Ohio State is a great example of how they navigated losing some of their key pieces on the offensive line, too, right? Like, it took them a few weeks to figure out the 5 that they were going to go with to win the national championship last year. So, again, that's one of the key roles for head coaching down the stretch of the season.
I would just say I'm not that concerned about that depth when it comes to the skill positions. Surratt's terrific.
Agreed, yes.
Omar Cooper's been phenomenal. If
Absolutely.
you shut down Roman Hemby, Kalon Black can be the guy that beats you even after the BB injury. Obviously, Mendoza is the one guy you absolutely cannot afford to lose. But that offensive line needs to get healthy. They lost 2 guys last week, and Cignetti has pointed that out, that we have to have at least 4 of those 5 guys in concert to have that chemistry to do what we want to do offensively.
Yeah, I think, again, you're nitpicking here because this team has been so unbelievably
There's no other
dominant
place to pick, Dave.
this season. Right, exactly. And I would just say, again, like, I agree with everything you're saying about Penn State, but I think on paper, the game for number 1, the game for number 2, neither one of them feels particularly close this week. I think if we're looking at the Big Ten teams that are toward the top of the college football playoff rankings, the big one that everyone has circled that, hey, this could be a game where one of those teams stumbles is Oregon going into Iowa. And Iowa finally got the respect it deserved as they broke into the college football playoff rankings after being on the precipice of getting into the AP. We're talking about 2 of the top 6 scoring defenses in the country going head-to-head. This feels to me, Jake, like a really close game.
Yeah, factor in the weather, too. I mean, this is, and I knew this because I was undefeated on the road, number 2 team in the country with playoff hopes when I lost at Kinnick in 2016. It's a tough place to go in and win, and Dan Lanning knows that. The Oregon Ducks know that. And again, I go back to the coaching philosophy here because I'll start with Will Stein, the offensive play caller for the Ducks. I think sometimes your greatest gift is your biggest threat as well. Will Stein is a creative play caller. I love studying his offense and what he does to scheme guys open. And yet, in a game like this with the weather and really just, I think, the way their offense is structured, I love their offensive line and their run game. I would love to see them put some of that creativity to the side and just run the ball, win up front with your talented backfield, and then be prepared for 3 to 5 times in this game. That's when your creativity can shine to try to scheme some guys open downfield. But I think this game's going to be won and lost at the line of scrimmage.
November in Iowa City, we see Kirk Ferentz just waiting on the sidelines for you to make a mistake. We're going to keep this game within 3 or 7. We're going to make a special teams play. We're going to pick you off in plus territory and find a way to score. I just think it's amazing that Iowa has done what it's done. Let's remember the 2 losses for Iowa this year. A last-second 54-yard field goal on the road against Iowa State, and then you play Indiana tougher than anybody else has. Game you potentially would win if Gronowski stays healthy. And you've done this with every opponent well aware that you basically have no real passing attack and that you are going to run the football and you're going to run it with the quarterback in between the tackles. And Kirk Ferentz, after 26 years, says, well, if you can figure it out and beat us, then go ahead and do it. And very few people are able to do so.
And that's the beauty of it. Again, like when we lost in 2016, like Iowa is so comfortable running for 4 yards on first down, 4 yards on second down. It's 3rd and 2. Maybe you can get off the field, and then they'll get 3 yards, and it's a fresh set of downs, and they milk the play clock, and they shorten the game. And it's just frustrating to play against them because every first down, as the clock winds down, it adds to the pressure of, holy cow, we're not going to get many opportunities. We need to score on top of the fact their special teams is going to make plays. So I'm wondering for Tosh Lapoy, do you sell out? Like, if I'm him, I would sell out on early downs. If you can get Iowa into 3rd and long situations, that's how you win the game. Easier said said than done. And the other thing I'll say just for Dante Moore, this is a huge game for him because you think about when he struggled. It was against Indiana, which runs simulated zone pressure. He just was not seeing the game very well. That's what Iowa does. They run a ton of zone, very disciplined zone defense. It's up here for Dante Moore when his arm is going to be called upon.
I'm fascinated to see, too, just how the Ducks respond to that chaos that we see at Kinnick. And you were talking about it, Jake. It kind of has been the place where dreams go to die.
Absolutely.
In the Big Ten. It's the first time being exposed to it. Again, Autzen Stadium is no different, right? Autzen Stadium is an incredibly difficult place for the opposition to come out and play. But it's one thing when it's your home field, and it's exactly the opposite.
I think we'd
when it's a road
feel
game.
probably a little bit different about this game if it were in Eugene. I think the element of it
100%.
being in Kinnick and the weather is the one thing that changes everything and maybe evens that field. And I think the playoff committee did, right, give some respect to Iowa. I think they were just outside the most recent AP top 25. They're inside the top 20 in the CFP. So clearly they have the committee's respect, and especially in Iowa City, they have Dan Lanning's full attention.
Absolutely. And the playoff committee is kind of communicating a bit of uncertainty for Oregon, sitting at number 9 in the AP. They're number 6. But they're saying, hey, you have an opportunity now with 3 of your 4 games against current top 25 teams to win. And you talked about it on Tuesday. Maybe even get a bye if you win out.
Potentially.
I don't know what the playoff committee is saying about Oregon, but I went on a 5-minute diatribe about that.
Yeah,
yesterday.
I heard it. Yeah.
So so we'll just let you take
You
it
can
from
go
here.
ahead and
Rick.
hit the DVR.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
Go on DVR,
Tuesday
and I'll tell you what I
from
think what
Wednesday
the
morning.
playoff committee said about Oregon.
Let's look ahead to Saturday because Big Ten Tailgate is at the place where dreams often go to die for Hawkeye opponents. 2 hours live from Iowa City to get you ready for that top 20 showdown. Then Jerry DiNardo joins me for Countdown to Kickoff. We'll take you on the field before the top-ranked Buckeyes clash with the Boilermakers. It all starts Saturday at a very special time, 10:30 a.m. Eastern, 7:30 a.m. Pacific on the Big Ten Network and the Fox Sports app.
Showed you the CFP rankings earlier. Here's how they translate into a bracket. Buckeyes and Hoosiers would get byes. Oregon would open in Lubbock against Texas Tech. Were they to win that game, they'd play Ohio State in round 2 for the second straight year. IU would get the winner of Notre Dame and BYU. Memphis, by the way, the 12 seed, though they do not appear in the rankings, getting the one guaranteed non-power conference spot. And we are joined now by Fox Sports lead game analyst Joel Klatt. Joel, these first college football playoff rankings are always interesting, if for no other reason than they give us a little bit of insight into how the current committee thinks. So I'll just give you the floor. What stood out to you in these first rankings?
I think, the first thing is that they value the Big Ten a lot more than the AP has during the course of the year. I've been talking about it, and I'm sure you guys have as well, that the middle of the Big Ten has been vastly underrated by the AP. Washington, Michigan, USC, Iowa, and Iowa is the more specific one. And the AP continues to leave Iowa off the poll. They're at number 26, just on the outside. Well, in the committee's eyes, they're +6. That's the biggest mover or difference of anybody on the 2 polls. And what I think that this does, this valuing of the middle of the Big Ten, which is, and rightly so, is that it allows a path for one of those teams to play themselves into a position to get a bid into the college football playoff. It's a lot, and we get down to this, it's a lot of who did you beat, are they ranked, what are the quality wins that you have on your schedule. Well, now this affords an opportunity that these teams down the stretch, whether it's Michigan getting to play Ohio State, or if it's Iowa getting to play USC and Oregon having to play Iowa, USC, and Washington. Now everybody, they've got this ammunition to rise up the rankings, and I thought that was my biggest takeaway. And then the other one that I would just throw out there is, I think it's pretty clear that the committee is telling us that Texas at 9-3 could potentially get in. Now, I'm not saying I agree with that, but I think with what they have left on their schedule, Texas being 11 right now, they've got to go to Georgia. They've got Texas A&M later in the year. If they were to split those and go 9-3, they would have some marquee wins, and those wins being what I think is carrying the day for a lot of these teams. So I don't think it's out of the equation that we could have a 9-3 team get an at-large bid, and if that's the case, it would be Texas.
All right, well, let's turn it back to the Big Ten. You mentioned those teams in the middle and the opportunities that a lot of these teams now have to make it to the CFP. And to your point, a team you've been beating the drum for, Iowa, is one of those teams at number 20, as you pointed out. They've got Oregon. Oregon was rated lower by the committee than they're rated by the AP and lower than by you. I know you had them as number 5 in your poll this week. Now they've got to go to Iowa City. We know how difficult it is to play at Kinnick. We saw Indiana almost lose there at Kinnick Stadium. So give me a sense of what you think sways the balance in this game between the Hawks and the Ducks.
It's turnovers. That's it. I don't think that Iowa has enough offensively to sit there and get to 17 or 20 just with their offense. So they need a short field, and they need their defense or special teams to create offense for them, whether it's in the form of a score or in the form of great field position. And listen, they're great at that. You know, that's not like saying that for any team. That's obviously a recipe for an upset. But for Iowa, it's more specific because they don't throw the football. They don't get chunk plays. Now, they're running it really well. I think their offensive line has maybe been the most improved offensive line from the early parts of September until now that I've seen on film. They're running the football very well. And part of that is Gronowski getting going in the run game and using his legs. But that defense creating turnovers is where this game, the rubber meets the road. It's going to be raining, maybe even sleeting by the time the game is over. And Dante Moore has got to be careful with the football because this Iowa defense, when they maintain their levels, they play that zone coverage, eyes in the backfield, tips and overthrows always end up in the hands of the Hawkeyes. And if that happens, then they're going to have a chance to play from ahead and get Oregon into an uncomfortable spot, and that's where I think the game is either won or lost.
Yeah, it's interesting. The beginning of the year, there was some hand-wringing in Iowa City because that defense wasn't creating a lot of turnovers. But to your point, been doing really well here the last several weeks, and then special teams, an area where they always excel. Caden Weegan's just been incredible this year. I want to talk about the very top of the rankings, and I know you've had Ohio State 1, Indiana 2, committee also Ohio State 1 and Indiana 2. They noted the differences for them were defense and offensive line. Would you agree that that's what separates the two, or is there something else that you see as the difference?
Separates them from each other?
Yeah, from each other. From each
country?
other. Right. They said Ohio State was ahead of Indiana because they had a superior offensive line and a superior defense.
Well, I think I think they misspoke on the offensive line part because I think Indiana could win the Joe Moore Award. You know, Rev, they've run it for 300 yards 5 different times.
I'm with you. Yep.
You know, they're the number 2 rushing team in all of Power 4. So I think that the committee can at times, you know, you stick a camera in the face of somebody that's not experienced doing that, and they can just say things. Now, the defense, I think that's a decent point. To be honest with you, Ohio State's defense is historically good. I don't know who scores 17 points on that team. I really don't. You watch them on film. They're multiple in their schematics, and yet I know that they're simple for themselves, very difficult for the opponent to face. They're long, they're athletic. And I think what was more dangerous, and if I was the committee and I was asked, like, why is Ohio State above Indiana? I would say, well, number one, even though Indiana has a couple of really quality wins at Iowa and at Oregon, we also value Texas. So Ohio State has that win over Texas in week 1. And then we also got to see Ohio State shift into 4th gear on Saturday against Penn State. And Rev, I got to tell you, that was kind of like one of those throw you in the back of your seat moments where you're like, oh, okay, we get it. It's in there. They're just scratching the surface. You know, they play such good complementary football. They play methodical to try to take snaps away from their defense. But when they needed it, when they wanted to, they turned it on, and it wasn't even close against Penn State. I know Indiana has been really impressive, but that 2, 3, 4 possessions against Penn State, I think put not only the committee on notice, but the entire country on notice that is the best team in the country.
Well, they're both fabulous. And again, I do think we're splitting hairs, but that's the job that you have when you put rankings together. It's the job the committee has as well each week. I want to ask you about the 2 quarterbacks because I think kind of a subplot in this whole deal, this collision course that those two seem to be on for Indianapolis. And there are some teams in the Big Ten that have designs on getting one of those spots, and it certainly could happen. But were they to both go unbeaten, they would go head-to-head in Indy. You'd have them playing for the 1 seed in the college football playoff for sure. you'd also have perhaps the two quarterbacks playing for the Heisman. I mean, I think Julian Sand and Fernando Mendoza are probably 1-2 in some order right now in the Heisman race. You just saw Sand this week. You've seen Mendoza. How would you separate or compare those two quarterbacks?
Man, it's hard to compare them. They've been so good, and they're great fits for each of the offenses that they run. You know, Julian does such an amazing job being efficient with the football, regardless of where he's throwing it. And he understands that the only thing that is going to derail this Ohio State team is if he starts turning the football over and putting that defense in a bad position. If they're just forcing the opponent to drive the length of the field, that opponent's not going to score many points, if any at all. And so he's got to play efficient, somewhat careful and safe with the football. But then you see him when he does take some chances or throw the ball down the field, and it's so accurate. I think that's one of the things that I found remarkable last week is just the accuracy with which he threw some of those deep passes to Carnell Tate and to Jeremiah Smith. Now, conversely, for Indiana, it's a different style of offense. It's about the quarterback being a point guard, you know, and Fernando Mendoza does that incredibly well. He's got a quick release. He's got a great command of what they're trying to do offensively. The ball is on time and on target everywhere. He can run. I think that's an underrated part of his game, and he's a perfect fit for that offense. It's interesting because championship game weekend, you know, if things play out like they sit right now, what we could have is the top four in the Heisman Trophy, odds, race, whatever you want to call it, all playing one another. You could have Mendoza against Sayin in the Big Ten, and you could have Marcel Reed against Ty Simpson in the SEC, and the two winners would then kind of get pitted against each other in the voters' minds for who wins that Heisman Trophy. I think that's going to be a fascinating deal, and I'm glad that Julian Sayin is getting the love that he deserves because there's not many players playing better than Julian Sayin. I know he's young, and I know at times people say, like, well, he had great players around him. Yeah, but, man, this guy, his brain, his quick release, his efficiency with the ball, it's all off the charts.
No, it's incredible. I mean, he's on pace to break the single-season completion percentage mark in college football by a wide margin. And to your point, he's not doing it by dinking and dunking. He is throwing the ball
by the way,
down the field.
He had four touchdown passes last week, 3 incompletions. 2 of them were throwaways.
Yeah,
I mean,
it's
like,
wild.
He threw it away. He threw it out of bounds. And so you're talking about a guy that played Penn State and missed 1 throw. That is wild. It blows my mind. As a guy that played the position, like, that's hard to do against air. Like, I don't get it.
Yeah. No, it's awfully impressive. Both these guys are fantastic. I would relish the opportunity to see them go head-to-head in Indy. I think it'd be incredible. Before we get to that, though, we got a month of football left. Indiana's going to Penn State. That's big noon this week. Indiana's never won at Penn State, which is kind of crazy to think when you consider the fact that the Nittany Lions have been in the league now for 3 decades. But again, I think it speaks to what a remarkable story Indiana's been these last couple years versus where they have been for most of their history, and also speaks to how good Penn State has been. When you look at this Penn State team that you just saw in person last week, is there anything you saw there which you think could provide challenges here and make things difficult for the Hoosiers?
Yeah, I mean, they run the football when they want to, and they can do it effectively. I thought the first half, their game plan was pretty solid against Ohio State. They're 17-14 in that game. Now, granted, they got that turnover right before halftime from C.J. Donaldson, but they were able to run the ball with Katron Allen and Nick Singleton, and getting Nick Singleton going is very important. They need both of those guys to be able to produce and put them in positions to succeed. For Nick Singleton, that means getting him in space a little bit more often than what they have during the course of the year. And with Katron Allen, it means volume. You've got to get him the football. Now, what happened in that game is that they were doing a great job attacking the perimeter early, in particular on some of these toss sweeps, jet sweeps, getting on the edge of the defense. And then in the second half, they didn't go back to that. They need to take a look at that film and realize that as a play caller, you can't get bored. You know, Rev, you don't go broke taking a profit. And so if something's working, stick with it, you know, until they take it away. You can't assume that a defense is going to take something away just because you've had success with it early in the game.
Good stuff, Joel. Have fun in Happy Valley. We'll look forward to hearing you and Gus and Jenny on the call, and we appreciate your time as always.
You bet. Have a good day, bud.
You too.
If you don't have Washington in your college football playoff conversation, I think you're doing it wrong. Look at the Huskies' only 2 losses against number 1 Ohio State and on the road against a Michigan team that is now part of the CFP Top 25. And then look ahead. Washington will be favored against Wisconsin, Purdue, and UCLA. And, of course, another opportunity to build that resume. Final game of the regular season against Oregon, which will be played in Seattle. Having good players always helps. This has been a great story by Jedd Fisch. When he arrived in Seattle, his roster had like 3 deflated footballs and an equipment manager. Now we're talking about a possible playoff appearance thanks to guys like Damon Williams, Jonah Coleman, Denzel Boston, among the nation's best in all their respective passing, rushing, and receiving categories. Let's take a closer look now at how the Washington offense puts opposing defenses in conflict. Thanks to the use of our touchscreen technology, obviously guys like Williams, Coleman, and Boston are the key. But it's a play caller like Jedd Fisch and how he sets those guys up with pre-snap motions and disguises that's the secret sauce to this offense.
Exactly. I mean, you need great players to execute, but the best play callers, they make the simple appear to be complex to the defense. And here's exactly what I'm talking about. This is a simple A-gap run. The key is you're going to leave this play side linebacker and this safety unblocked. You're telling me you're going to run an A-gap run into 2 unblocked defenders? Yes, I am, and let me show you why. The key is Damon Williams' legs. Even when he's not carrying the ball, he's a threat. This same unblocked linebacker, he has to play outside in case Damon keeps it. You see the wide receiver down into the flat. That gets the safety to bite. The beautiful thing is your now healthy offensive line forms a great wall. Key block is Decker DeGraff. It parts like the Red Sea. And Jonah Coleman, a guy we all know is a threat, is somehow untouched into the second, third level. Not quite a touchdown, but still an explosive run. And he's untouched because of the schematics of Jedd Fisch. All right, now to complete the trio, here is Denzel Boston, one of the best receivers in the Big Ten. What you notice here, you see him getting set up. That's because he started in bunch and came in motion. Why that's important? Number 1 traveled with him. That indicates man-to-man coverage to the offense. What you're also going to have is a receiver fake a jet sweep. That's going to take this safety. He's going to run with him. And because of where Denzel Boston is set up, he's going to appear to block on this exact jet sweep. So the number 1 that has him in man-to-man coverage, he's seeing jet sweep to him. That's going to leave Denzel Boston untouched on 3rd and 6 when everyone knows he's going to get the ball for an easy, explosive play. As dangerous as this offense is, Jedd Fisch somehow has the ability to scheme guys open when we all know they're getting the ball untouched in critical situations. That's the sign and indicator of a good play caller, Rick.
And a very big key that you just pointed out, this Washington offensive line, which had been banged up throughout the course of the year, now a lot healthier, allowing Jedd Fisch to call all these plays and making it even more difficult this weekend for the Wisconsin defense. Same location, different sport. Tonight you can catch men's hoops from Seattle. Danny Sprinkle and the Huskies hitting the hardwood for a matchup with Denver. Coverage begins at 10 Eastern, 7 Pacific on the Big Ten Network and the Fox Sports app. Meanwhile, back to the football focus and a look at the bowl eligibility breakdown inside the Big Ten. You have 10 teams already bowl eligible. Northwestern is 1 win away. Nebraska in that bowl eligibility group right now. They've gotten to 6 wins, but clearly the complexion of the season changed when Dylan Raiola went down. There are still great things possibly in the future, the immediate future for Nebraska, but that immediate future is a game against UCLA this weekend on the road, and I think kind of a litmus test for TJ Lateef and this Nebraska offense. What can it actually be over the final month of the regular season and into wherever they end up in the postseason?
Yeah, I'm just interested what TJ Lateef looks like this week because, you know, this is a week where he gets to prep as the known starter. And that's completely, I don't think he definitely didn't anticipate getting thrown in there in a gotta-have-it situation against the Trojans. But earlier in the year, we look at his game against Houston Christian, against Akron. I understand the level of opponent. I assume he knew he was going to play in both those games and looked good and threw a nice deep ball. So it's completely different when you have a full week to prepare, but I'd expect regardless a heavy dose of Emmett Johnson, who's been one of the best running backs in college football.
Yeah, you get a heavy dose of Emmett Johnson even when Dylan Raiola is healthy. I mean, it's amazing how much he is relied on in that Nebraska offense. It'll be interesting for Lateef, too. Remember, he's from Compton, California, so he's back home. You got all the people around you. I mean, you worry about a little bit maybe about the nerves and the distractions.
A lot
and
of
all
ticket
that.
requests
A lot
this
of
week.
ticket requests, yeah. So it'll be interesting. It's obviously a huge game for UCLA. A very difficult schedule down the stretch if they're going to try to sneak into bowl eligibility. That Maryland-Rutgers game is huge, guys, for bowl eligibility. They both need 2 wins. I think you can look at each one of their schedules and see one more game that you'd feel like you have a really good shot in. So this one becomes a huge one in terms of swaying who's got the best shot here.
Yeah, it's a gotta have it. And Loxley even spoke to even reasons beyond that, like getting a late season win, a second conference win, like just a chance to take that step as a program, and especially with all their young talent. But to me, knowing Callie McManus and the Rutgers offense, they like to push the ball down the field. Well, the Maryland defense takes it away as well as anybody. So can you push the ball down the field while also keeping it safe? Maryland's winning formula is predicated on winning the turnover battle, which they've done a good job of for the majority of the season.
Listen, everybody wants to win all the time, but when you get to November and you're stuck in jags like these teams are stuck in, after the starts of their respective seasons, perfect through non-conference, especially with Maryland, you had a really good chance, probably should have been 6-0 at one point before giving away 3 fourth-quarter leads. It does sometimes comes down to who actually wants it during practice and leading up to the game.
Well, you got to want it at some point, too. I agree, but, you know, you are what you put on film, and the players need to understand that. And there's a lot of young guys on Maryland's roster. There's a lot of veterans on Rutgers' roster. You only get so many opportunities to play the game. Why not take advantage of it?
I thought you were going to the "we are what we thought we were." For Dave Brevson and Jake Butt, I'm Rick Pizzo. As always, appreciate the hang here on Big Ten Today.